There is a moment buried in a behind-the-scenes clip from a Turkish television set back in 2016 that fans still screenshot and share to this day. Two actors are sitting in a makeup chair. The cameras are not rolling. The crew is moving around them. And yet neither of them is paying attention to any of it. They are completely locked into each other, mid-conversation, laughing at something only they seem to understand. The clip lasts 11 seconds. It has been viewed over 40 million times. That moment did not come from a script. No director called action. No network planned it. It just happened. And somehow, the entire internet felt it. This is the story of Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu, two people who met on a television set, fell into something electric in front of millions of eyes, and then walked away from it in a way that nobody fully understood. Years later, their story still generates headlines. Fan edits of their scenes together still go viral. And somewhere in the spaces between what is known and what is imagined, millions of people around the world are still trying to figure out whether what they saw on screen was just great acting or something more. To understand why this story still matters, you have to understand what Turkish television was in the mid-2010s. The industry, known internationally as Dizi, was quietly becoming one of the most watched television markets on the planet. Shows were being translated into over 50 languages. Entire communities in Latin America, the Middle East, and Southern Europe were scheduling their evenings around Turkish dramas. The storytelling was operatic, the production values were climbing fast, and the actors coming out of Istanbul were developing global fan bases overnight. Into this world stepped two people who, individually, were already stars. Together, they became something else entirely. Baris Arduc had built his reputation the careful way. He started in smaller roles, took supporting parts in prestige productions, and developed a reputation among casting directors as someone who made every scene better than the script alone could make it. Audiences noticed the intensity he brought. Critics noticed the restraint. By the time he was offered a lead role in the series that would change everything, he had spent years laying the foundation for exactly this kind of moment. Elcin Sangu's path had been different, but equally deliberate. She had moved between genres, demonstrating a range that frustrated easy categorization. She could do comedy. She could do heartbreak. She could inhabit a scene so completely that viewers forgot they were watching television. Her fanbase was deeply loyal in a way that numbers alone could not explain. These were not casual viewers. These were people who felt like they knew her. When the two were cast together in Medcezir, and later in what would become their defining project together, the expectation was already high. But expectation and reality can be very different things. Nobody was fully prepared for what actually happened when the cameras started rolling. The chemistry between them was not the slow-burning, manufactured kind that gets built through press tours and strategic social media moments. It arrived immediately. Directors who worked on their early shared scenes have spoken in interviews about noticing something unusual in the first week of production. The scenes were not overwritten. The dialogue was functional, the kind of setup and response writing that keeps a plot moving. But what happened between those two people when the camera was on them transformed the material into something that felt genuinely alive. Timing that usually takes months to develop between co-stars appeared to already be there. Eye contact that scripts can call for but never guarantee was simply present. Audiences felt this before they had language for it. The Turkish word for what happens between two people who are magnetically, inexplicably drawn to each other on screen is hard to translate directly, but viewers across different languages kept reaching for the same phrases. Natural. Real. Like watching something private. The comment sections under their scenes became document archives of collective reaction. People were not just watching the show anymore. They were watching the two of them watch each other. And then the fan communities started paying closer attention to what was happening off-screen. This is where the story gets complicated in the most interesting way. Because what audiences were responding to was not just confined to scripted moments. The social media presence of both actors, their public appearances, the interviews they gave separately and occasionally together, all of it was being analyzed with an intensity that would feel invasive if it were not also, on some level, openly invited by the nature of celebrity in the digital age. Fans cataloged looks. They timestamped moments. They built elaborate timelines. A movement within the international fan community had its own vocabulary, its own inside references, and a level of organizational commitment that some people found touching and others found genuinely alarming. What fueled all of it was a question that nobody could definitively answer. Was the connection between Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu something that existed only within the fiction of their shared projects, or was there something real underneath it? To be completely clear about what is known and what is speculation, both actors have given interviews over the years discussing their professional relationship in warm, respectful terms. There were periods where their public appearances and social media activity generated significant fan speculation about the nature of their relationship beyond the set. Both of them have also been in confirmed relationships with other people at various points. The fan theories, however intensely held, remain fan theories. What can be stated without qualification is that the on-screen partnership produced a body of work that genuinely resonated with millions of people, and that both actors have acknowledged the unusual quality of their professional connection in their own words. But here is what makes this story genuinely fascinating rather than just another celebrity rumor cycle. The intensity of the audience response was not irrational. Something real was happening. It just may not have been the something that the most invested fans were hoping for. Watch their scenes together with the sound off. This is something that acting coaches and film scholars sometimes do when analyzing performance, removing dialogue to isolate the physical language of two people sharing a frame. What you notice immediately is the quality of attention. They are watching each other with a focus that does not drop between the lines. Most actors, even very good ones, have moments where the scene exists primarily in the words, where the space between dialogue is just waiting. With Baris and Elcin, the space between dialogue is often the most interesting part. Something is being communicated that the script did not write. Whether that something is purely professional craft or whether it draws from something more personal is a question that neither of them has ever fully answered in public. There is a particular interview from around 2017 that fans have returned to thousands of times. The two were promoting their project together, seated side by side in a format that is common in Turkish entertainment media. The interviewer asks them separately what it is like to work with the other person. The answers they give are careful, professional, and genuinely warm. But it is what happens when one of them is talking about the other that people keep watching. The listening. The small involuntary expressions. The way a certain kind of smile appears and then gets contained. You can construct whatever narrative you want around 11 seconds of footage. That does not make the 11 seconds less real. The project that brought them to international attention was, by any measure, a significant television event. The ratings in Turkey were exceptional. But the real story was happening in the fan communities forming in countries where most people had never heard Turkish spoken before. Subtitled versions were spreading across streaming platforms and fan sites. Discussion forums were operating in Portuguese, Arabic, Spanish, and English simultaneously. The show was becoming the kind of cultural object that escapes its original context and takes on new meaning in places its creators never imagined. And at the center of all of it were two people whose fictional relationship had become a container for something much larger than the story it was telling. There is a theory in media studies about parasocial relationships, the emotional bonds that viewers form with people they see on screen. The theory is not dismissive. These bonds are real in the sense that they produce genuine feeling, genuine loyalty, genuine grief when things end. What was happening with the international fanbase around Baris and Elcin was a particularly vivid example of parasocial attachment that had found an unusual focus. People were not just attached to the characters. They were attached to the idea of the two actors as a real unit. The distinction between the fictional relationship and the real relationship had become productively blurred, and fans were living in that blur willingly, happily, sometimes desperately. When the professional collaboration came to an end, as these things inevitably do, the response in the fan communities was disproportionate in a way that surprised even longtime observers of Turkish celebrity culture. These were not reactions to a cancelled show. These were reactions that looked and sounded more like grief over the ending of a real relationship. The comment sections filled with processing language. People were working something out. What exactly they were working out is worth thinking about carefully. Part of it was simply the loss of something genuinely pleasurable. The show had been good. The performances had been extraordinary. The collaborative spark between these two actors had produced scenes that people had watched dozens of times and still found moving. Losing that was a real loss, and it deserved real feeling. But part of it was something more complicated. The audience had invested not just in the story, but in a possibility. The possibility that what they saw on screen was a glimpse of something that existed beyond the screen. That possibility remained permanently unresolved, which meant the attachment could never fully close. Open endings keep people coming back. Unanswered questions generate more engagement than answered ones. The story of Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu became, in its own way, an open ending that the internet has been trying to finish ever since. Both of them moved forward. Baris Arduc continued building a career that expanded his range and confirmed his place among the most compelling actors working in Turkish television and film. Elcin Sangu took on projects that challenged her in different directions, demonstrated new dimensions of her work, and maintained the kind of devoted following that most performers spend entire careers trying to build. They have both spoken publicly, in various contexts, about the importance of the work they did together and the professional relationship they shared. What neither of them has done is give the audience the definitive statement that would close the loop. And perhaps that is entirely appropriate. The question of what was real between them, beyond the confirmed professional collaboration and the obvious creative affinity, is not really anyone else's question to answer. What belongs to the public is the work. The scenes. The performances that moved people across language barriers and cultural differences and time zones. That part is documented and available and genuinely remarkable. What is more interesting to sit with is the question of why this particular pairing, among the many talented actors and compelling on-screen relationships that Turkish television has produced, achieved the specific kind of immortality that the internet assigns to a very small number of things. Why do those 11 seconds in the makeup chair still circulate? Why does a new fan discovering these performances in 2024 feel the same thing that audiences felt in 2016? What is being transmitted? Part of the answer is technical. Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu are both exceptionally skilled at the specific kind of presence that translates through a camera. There is something in their physical expressiveness, in the quality of their attention during shared scenes, that reads with unusual clarity even through a screen. The camera is not kind to everything. It flattens a great deal. Some performers lose something essential in translation from live performance to recorded image. These two gain something. The camera found in both of them a frequency that it could receive and transmit, and when they were in scenes together, that frequency doubled. The other part of the answer is more human and more mysterious. Some combinations of people produce something that neither of them produces alone. This happens in music, in film, in literature, in sports, in friendships and partnerships that change the course of lives. The combination creates something that cannot be fully attributed to either individual. Call it chemistry if you want, though the word has been cheapened by overuse. Call it resonance. Call it the particular thing that happens when two people are genuinely paying attention to each other in a medium that is designed to carry exactly that kind of attention outward to an audience. That thing, whatever it should be called, is visible in the work Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu did together. It is not a rumor. It is not a projection. It is there in the footage, frame by frame, available to anyone who wants to look. The internet does not forget the things that move it. It does not forget the combination that worked, the partnership that produced genuine feeling, the faces that appear together and make sense in a way that is hard to explain, but immediately recognizable. Years from now, someone will come across a scene from their shared work and feel what audiences felt when it was new. They will search for more. They will find the 11-second clip in the makeup chair. They will feel whatever that 11 seconds makes you feel. And they will add their voice to the ongoing conversation that began in 2016 and has not stopped since. What Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu created together was not just television. It was a specific emotional frequency that found its way into millions of people and stayed there. The story of how it happened, why it happened, and what it meant beyond the frames of the scenes themselves remains beautifully, stubbornly unresolved. And maybe that is exactly why it still breaks the internet. Because the most powerful stories are always the ones that do not fully close. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.